if you have $50 billion, you may as well spend it, right? Welcome back to the Illinoize podcast. I'm Patrick Pfingsten. I write the Illinoize political newsletter, which you can find at theillinoize.com. We're recording this late in the day on Wednesday after Governor JB Pritzker gave his combined State of the State and budget address. We'll have some clips from his 51-minute speech and some reaction. We'll talk to Democratic Representative Jay Hoffman from the Metro East, as well as Republican Senator Chapin Rose, who's the lead budget negotiator for Senate Republicans. First, though, what's in the governor's budget? That's the big question. That's the proposal. It's the starting point that we have between now and when the legislature adjourns in May. It is just the starting point. It isn't a final budget, of course. The legislature still has to enact that. The general fund spending is around $49.6 billion. That's and if you add the extra spending that the legislature did during the current fiscal year, the current budget is on pace for just a shade under $50 billion. So the governor, when speaking to the joint chamber, took a lot of credit, of course, for the improved fiscal situation in the state.
Our budgets are built on a solid foundation of normalized state revenue and more efficient management of state resources. We have used our surpluses to chip away at our long-term liabilities too, including $500 million more into our pension stabilization fund over the last 2 years. And my proposal this year to increase that by another $200 million. The percent of the budget needed to meet our statutory obligations has declined as our revenues have grown and our fiscal fortunes have improved.
So there's a lot to touch on. We've heard a lot over the last few months, even since the governor started his re-election campaign back in 2021, about the ideas of free college for everyone, free preschool for everyone, free childcare for everyone. He definitely backed off of some of those big numbers, especially considering the state's financial situation. Let's start with the child care part of this. Here's what the governor had to say.
Working parents need more quality child care options. The broader shortage of labor that we're seeing all across the state right now can't be addressed without growing the availability of child care for working families. But Illinois' current child care assistance program is based on unreliable and unpredictable funding. And that makes it hard for providers to invest in their workers or to grow. The current system is based on attendance in a given month, which, as all parents know, fluctuates if kids are sick or parents' work status changes. When attendance falls under a certain minimum level in a month, the provider's reimbursement rate for that month gets cut, even though their fixed costs for providing services that month don't change. As any small business owner knows, that causes tremendous uncertainty for the future. Going forward, that's going to change. So I propose Smart Start workforce compensation contracts to move us towards more stable funding to support high-quality programming and competitive wages for caregivers.
All right, a little bit of a word salad there, but here's kind of the guts of the early childhood proposal from what we were briefed on. It's $75 million in additional money for government-funded preschool slots. There are already some exist, and it seems that by 2027 they want enough that it is essentially universal preschool. $130 million would be for that child care worker program you heard the governor mention. Additional $40 million goes into early intervention, which is the therapy, speech, orthopedic, occupational physical therapy, those sort of things for kids so they don't fall behind, and $100 million in capital to help build new child care facilities that they hope would help reduce the deserts, the inability for people to find childcare in their areas, whether it be rural or in some more urban parts of the state. And the other issue that we heard a lot leading into was the idea of free college tuition in the state. It is a tuition assistance program. It's an increase in MAP grants, and it will specifically help students at community colleges.
With a $100 million increase in MAP, we can make history. Together with Pell Grants, virtually everyone at or below median income in Illinois can go to community college tuition free. That means higher wages and better jobs in healthcare and IT, construction management, manufacturing, accounting, and much, much more.
So as part of that, the free college, which is kind of how it was described again leading up. So it's $100 additional million into the monetary assistance program grants. That brings it up to $700 million total. It allows, as they put it, the governor's office puts it, nearly all community college students and 40% of public university students who are at or below median income levels to have tuition and fees covered completely by MAP and Pell Grants. And there's also an additional $100 million in funding to higher education, which is laid out in the budget proposal as well. Of course, it's a big behemoth of a document, and there's a lot to go through. And then, of course, we'll see how much of it sticks as negotiations continue over the next couple of months. But we did want to get you some reaction. We are pleased to be joined by State Representative Jay Hoffman. He is a Democrat from Swansea in the Metro East. He's an assistant majority leader in the House. Leader, welcome. Let's start with your first impressions on what the governor had to say on Wednesday.
Oh, I thought it was very well done, and obviously the devil's in the details. So under our Constitution, I believe the governor goes first, and then the legislature begins to analyze his proposed budget and vis-a-vis last year, and literally goes line by line in order to develop the final product. But talking about budgets generally are boring and dull, but it does reflect. I don't think his speech was that way, but when we then discuss budgets with the general public, it does sometimes get lost in the figures and the millions of dollars or billions of dollars, and we're not really clear as to what the state priorities are. And I thought what he did very well is, I thought that he, although he talked about some of the numbers and the commitments financially, I thought he did a very good job of establishing what his priorities are for the next fiscal year and the long-term future of the state. So from that standpoint, it was well done. Now as we go through the process, we're going to have to look and see whether all of our priorities are met, or if we have different priorities, and we can work them out between the legislature and the governor's office. So from the fact that we have a proposed balanced budget with over $2 billion in the rainy day fund, and our backlog of bills is basically non-existent, is pretty amazing, considering at one point I believe we had $17 billion bill backlog under the previous administration. So if you would have told me then that we would be sitting with a $2 billion possibility of having a over $2 billion rainy day fund in case there's a downturn in the economy, and some of the economists who predicted that, in case they're correct, I would have said that would have been nearly impossible. But this proposed budget does that, while I believe addressing things like infrastructure projects, their job creation, law enforcement training and resources, education funding and long-term fiscal health of the state.
You know, I wrote about this the other day that it seems Democrats are kind of in a tough spot because when we finally seemingly gotten the state's fiscal ship up from the bottom of the ocean and floating again, we're looking at a recession in the face, and there seems to be a ton of pressure from inside your caucus and the Senate Democrat caucus to spend a lot of money on a lot of things. How do you balance the pragmatic part of keeping the ship afloat while trying to meet the needs on your side, especially those who are a lot more progressive and want more spending?
I mean, I believe that we have to always keep an eye, towards the future, what could be coming. And, not every year is going to see unforeseen revenue coming into our state coffers. We've been very fortunate that that's happened, but that's not going to last forever. So I think when we work with our members in order to continue to have a rainy day fund and continue to have a balanced budget, while at the same time move forward with the Early Childhood Smart Start Illinois initiative, we have to be mindful and very upfront that, hey, if we keep adding non-one-time expenditures into the base of the budget, at some time we're not going to have the same kind of revenues that we currently have, and it's going to have to be cut. And nobody wants to begin a program and later see it taken away. I think that the access for all 3 and 4-year-olds to preschool is something that should have been done years and years ago, and I applaud the governor for that initiative and making it a priority, because there's no doubt that having access to preschool for children who are 3 and 4 sets them on a lifetime of learning, and children who have had preschool are much more likely to be able to read at a 3rd grade level by 3rd grade, which experts would say that long term that is an indicator of being successful and not being a dropout of high school. So from that standpoint, I certainly think that could have been a priority a long time ago, and I applaud him for doing that.
But that's the thing. Can we really afford to bake an additional $3 billion into the budget right now? I mean, I think there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle who will tell you there are some pretty darn good ideas here, but can we really afford to build it in year after year?
Well, I think I would say for the Smart Start Illinois program, and again, I've just heard the generalities, so the specifics will have to be worked out, in the specific amount of money for I believe the 4-part program will have to be worked out. But I would say you can't afford not to, because as the governor pointed out, for every dollar that you invest into these preschool programs, you save $7 in the future. So I don't know what the source of that is, but I have seen it before and heard it before. Yet, as we look at other programs and other initiatives, I think we have to be mindful that we're not setting ourselves up for a huge crash in the future. So that isn't always easy. You pointed out that every member has their own priority, and some are more expensive than others. But you have to, as we work through this, we have to still be mindful and just be honest that whether or not we're going to be able to afford that long term.
All right, be honest with me. You've been around the block a few times. How much of this proposal that we heard today actually winds up in the final budget?
I think that I would say, what we heard today, a large portion is going to end up in a final budget because of the priorities of the governor. The question really is at what levels, and what can we agree to at what levels, and what can we afford at what levels. I think that the governor did a fantastic job of laying out his priorities, what his priorities are, and for most of us, at least on this side of the aisle, his priorities are very, very similar to what ours are. But I also know that he is very serious about ensuring that we have a rainy day fund, that we continue to pay our bills on time, that we make our pension payments, and that we truly have a balanced budget. And I share all those goals, and I believe that what he's put forward does that.
And for a Republican perspective, I sat down with State Senator Chapin Rose, a Republican from Mahomet, earlier today over Zoom, and discussed his thoughts and his reactions to the speech.
Yeah, look, we can talk about a couple of places where we can find some common ground, but I think the biggest top line for me really goes back to Susie Mendoza, right? The Democratic comptroller of the governor's own party. We need a hold line on spending. The mistake that governments always make is to not save, is to spin themselves into oblivion. And when you look at the fact that the state just got, bailed out by the federal taxpayers, and on all the things Governor Pritzker said today about how, he, paid off all the bills and done this and done that, it really comes back to the fact that he was handed billions of dollars from the federal taxpayers that dug us out of one hell of a hole. Okay. Now, by increasing spending on new programs, he's starting to dig the hole right over again. And so what I want to point out here is, $3 billion in new programmatic spending getting baked into the pie is setting yourself up for failure when the recession comes, which it is. Governor Pritzker's own econ people are telling him that. And, it's really ultimately setting the stage for yet another tax increase on the people of Illinois when that day comes, and it's coming. I mean, look, you can look at the manufacturer's purchase index, which is plummeted. You can look at the inflation rates that are now causing people to constrain consumption. But, virtually every economic indicator I've seen in the last, 2 months, every economist of any note, thinks you're anywhere from 3, 9, 12 months away from a recession. So why are we not then prudently, building an even bigger rainy day fund, right? And I think that go back to economic cycle it's history, right? Times are good and times are bad. Right now, you're coming off a budget high. That's when you're supposed to store up to protect yourself for the coming recession. And I just guess I fundamentally disagree with this notion we should go on this huge spending spree. I think Comptroller Mendoza was exactly right. We should hold the line on spending, build up those reserves, continue to pay off debt. And by the way, one critique I'll have, the governor talked about how, he paid off all the group health insurance bills. Well, not SIP and TRIP. And for your viewers, it's, SIP is the community college insurance program, and TRIP is the teachers' healthcare program. So I talked to somebody in my district last week, community college retiree, their dental bill hasn't been paid for 18 months. 18 months, Patrick. In fact, I've got a resolution on it to do a pretty significant task force on how to put SIP and TRIP on permanent, footing. But there are all those things like that. I'll give you another one. The governor talked about how he wants to help development disabled. Okay. In his budget, he's putting $63 million in new money in for development disabled. Even after that increase, we're over $500 million behind in funding for the development disability, where we should be from the Guidehouse report. Well, what's the Guidehouse report? The Guidehouse report was the study that was done with all the provider groups in the state to determine how much is needed to actually do right by the development disabled. Now, let me take a step off here. By any moral ethic, any modicum of integrity, to help people who truly can't help themselves, people who were born, unable to hold a job through no fault of their own, that is a moral imperative for society. Okay, you don't have to be a Democrat, you don't have to be a Republican. We can just say that we need to help the development disabled because it's the right thing to do. To not do that. And in fact, for Illinois to be 51st in the country, and yeah, I know there's 50 states, I'm adding in the District of Columbia as well. We're behind all 50 states and the District of Columbia. We're last in helping the development disabled. Yet we're going to have this big new spending spree on a bunch of bright, shiny new balls. And I think it's just being imprudent. And I think ultimately you're setting yourself up for complete failure when when the recession comes. And I don't know if it's 3 months from now or 6 months from now, but I got a pretty good darn hunch that sometime between the now and the FY24 budget ends, that's 18-month time horizon. If you look at the manufacturer's purchase index just last month, it's already, precipitously declining. So that is the number one unfallible indicator of recession. It's never failed.
So let's start with the college thing real quick, because this whole idea started with, basically before the campaign really even got going was the governor saying he wanted essentially universal college tuition paid for. There were some different iterations of different ideas, and what he proposed today seemingly backs off of that a little bit to just expand MAP grants a little bit and make it for community colleges. You have at least 2 in your district. I mean, doesn't that make
I got way more than 2 now,
doesn't it make sense to make community college more accessible, especially when MAP grants would be paying for most of it anyway?
Well, first of all, taxpayers pay for MAP grants. Okay. So MAP grants don't pay for anything. Taxpayers pay for MAP grants. But look, the investments in higher education, I think, are a place where our caucus is willing to, work with the governor. All right. I said there are places where we're going to be willing to work with them. The development disabled piece is one where we're willing to work with them. Frankly, Ameren and the power bill situation in downstate Illinois, with the doubling of people's power bills, is an area where we'll be willing to work with the governor. What I'm saying, though, is when you add up all these, new shiny balls, and by the way, MAP's not new, right? That's an existing program. You've got $3 billion of new baked in spend. And, you're right to note that this isn't quite community college for all, which is what he sort of promised, right? But, is that a good use of revenue? It can be if used wisely. Personally, I think MAP needs to be way more geared towards end product, right? So, for example, all these MAP, and you followed, I'm sure your viewers have followed all these institutions of higher education where the Biden administration is now bailing out student loan debt because they went to cooking school and got a degree that wasn't worth anything, and they're thousands of dollars in debt, and the only job they can get is at McDonald's, right? You've seen these bad actors schools, right? These pop-up for-profit so-called academic schools. Well, right now, those same people that the Biden administration is using federal taxpayer dollars to attempt to bail out the enormous student loan debt put on those students at so-called academic institutions, those same groups are eligible for MAP grants. Well, what are we really buying as a taxpayer with our MAP dollar? Are we helping someone get a good job with benefits, or are we simply sending someone to culinary school and then they go on to McDonald's? Or are we taking a MAP dollar and creating an auto mechanic that's going to make $100,000 a year and get health benefits? Okay. Those are 2 different fundamental outcomes. And I think the MAP, rather than just throw more money into the pot, and I've got bills on this, you could very smartly increase the effectiveness of MAP, lead to better outcomes for society, and most importantly, the individual involved, by using MAP in a much more efficacious manner. Let me give you an example. The bulk of MAP right now goes to 4 years. Okay. Community colleges, frankly, get very little MAP, and there's reasons for that. But the bulk of it goes to 4 years. But there are extreme restrictions on what you can use MAP for. So I'll give you a perfect example. Trucking right now is the most in-demand industry in America. You can make upwards of 6 figures today with a trucking license, and you can do it very quickly. You don't need a 4-year degree. You don't need a 4-year degree. But Can you use MAP for that? Oops, there's a problem. Is MAP being diluted from in-demand professions, high-demand professions where people are getting a good wage with benefits?
But why would you need a map for a CDL? I mean, essentially, I mean, that's, I'm not arguing with your
Because those are
context
taught
here, but
because you go to community college. Community college is where you get your CDLs.
okay, sure.
Yeah. My point is this: are we gearing our expenditure, our investment in something that's going to return on equity, or are we just simply giving people money to go to a for-profit school that right now even the Biden administration is saying is not educating anybody in anything that's useful, so much so that people have not found gainful employment, and now you're trying to bail them out of the student loan debt they incurred in the process of going to a cut rate, internet school. Okay, so MAP needs to be far, said differently, you can make a far greater investment with the money you have in MAP and serve, frankly, in a more efficient manner the people we have. If it wasn't a here it is, go anywhere you want, including for-profit schools that aren't going to give you anything in return for the taxpayer's investment.
My guess is Democrats are going to hear this line of thinking and argument and in opposition to the new programs and say this is just another conservative Republican who hates poor people and doesn't want to do anything to help those in need and pay for things that are holding people back. How do you guys?
Yeah, so quite the contrary. Dick Durbin himself has spoken on the U.S. Senate floor about the problems of the for-profit educational institutions and how they're fleecing people. Okay,
I'm talking more in general, though.
I know, but look, man. Except Patrick, we're the ones talking about helping the development disabled. Okay, Governor Pritzker's budget has left them behind, 51st in the country for the development disabled. Okay, so don't give me this "you're not helping people" crap. Governor Pritzker isn't helping the development disabled. You're $500 million behind what you need to actually help the development disabled in this state. Okay, so when I talk about moral construct to help, that's us, Republicans. Okay, but frankly, it shouldn't be Republicans. It should be everybody. And we would be willing to work with Governor Pritzker in a productive way to get our funding to where it needs to be for the development disabled. But my point is this: when you got $3 billion in all this new spending stuff, all these bright, shiny balls, and you're leaving behind the single most vulnerable people in our state, it's the exact opposite. You're accusing the wrong person.
Republicans have notoriously been left out of the budget process the last few years. Do you have any expectation that you guys will even be in the room this time around?
Let me give you the answer to you this way. I think there's places where we can work with the governor, and again, development disabled funding. I think we can work with them on hospital funding, and rural ERs and access to labor and delivery services are every bit as important as in inner city Chicago. The higher ed piece we talked about, I think there are important investments there. I think there's ways you can do them better. Okay, but we can talk about those things, and we will talk about those things with him. I want to say one other thing though, on this whole nonsense about Republicans. You said like, oh, they're just going to say Republicans don't like this group or that group. Let me point out something in this budget. Governor Pritzker's budget includes a $700 million spend because Joe Biden has cut Illinois off on Medicaid funding. Okay, April 1st, it cuts off. There's over $700 million the state taxpayers now are going to pick up because of Joe Biden cutting off spending. So I don't ever want to hear any more about this. Republicans don't like this group or that group, because we're now going to have to pick up $700 million in new spend from him cutting the state of Illinois off from FMAP match.
Senator Chapin Rose, Republican from R-Mahomet. Senator, appreciate the time and conversation as always.
Have a great day.
All right. Thanks to Representative Jay Hoffman and Senator Chapin Rose for their time. Obviously, there's a lot more time for discussion and debate and a lot more to come on parts of this proposal and other elements that will be included or excluded before the budget is passed and finalized in May. We'll keep an eye on it. Of course, you can follow along each day with us too at theillinoise.com. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.